The diplomatic mission. The stars had never looked so cold to Ambassador Sarah Chen as she stared through the reinforced viewport of the diplomatic vessel Harmony. At 52, she had spent most of her adult life negotiating peace between warring colonies and mediating trade disputes across the galaxy. But nothing in her 25 years of diplomatic service had prepared her for this moment. "Ambassador, we're receiving another transmission," called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. His young voice carried barely contained fear. "Same message as before." Sarah nodded without turning from the window. Beyond the glass, spread across the darkness of space like glittering jewels of death, floated the largest alien fleet humanity had ever encountered. 10,000 ships of the Vorthan Empire, each one larger than Earth's most powerful battlecruiser, hung in perfect formation around the planet she called home. The Vorthans had appeared without warning 3 days ago, emerging from hyperspace in a coordinated jump that spoke of military precision and overwhelming technological superiority. Their ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, creating rainbow patterns against the star field. But beauty couldn't hide their obvious purpose. "Play the message again," Sarah said quietly, finally turning from the viewport. The bridge of the Harmony was small, designed for diplomacy rather than warfare. Only 5 crew members occupied the space, all of them looking to her for answers she didn't have. The speakers crackled, and then a voice filled the air. Unlike human speech, the Vorthan language sounded like musical chimes mixed with harmonic resonance. The universal translator rendered it into crisp, emotionless English. "Primitive species of the third planet. Your civilization has been evaluated and found insufficient. Surrender your world and submit to Vorthan guidance, or face obliteration. You have 72 hours to comply. This message will not be repeated." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah walked to her captain's chair, a simple seat positioned at the center of the small command area. Her diplomatic uniform, deep blue with silver trim, felt heavier than usual. "Dr. Martinez," she called to the elderly xenobiologist hunched over his analysis station. "What do we know about their capabilities?" The gray-haired scientist looked up, his weathered face grim. "Based on our long-range scans, their technology is at least 2 centuries ahead of ours. Their ships use some form of quantum manipulation for propulsion, and their hulls appear to be composed of programmable matter. As for weapons," he paused, adjusting his glasses, "each ship carries enough firepower to level a continent." Sarah absorbed this information without flinching. She had learned long ago that showing fear, even justified fear, was the quickest way to lose a negotiation. Any biological data? Limited. They appear to be silicon-based life forms, roughly humanoid in structure but significantly taller, 7 to 8 feet on average. Most interesting is their apparent lack of individual identity markers. Every scan we've taken suggests they operate as a collective consciousness, a hive mind. Asked Torres from his station. "More sophisticated than that," Dr. Martins replied. "They seem to maintain individual personalities while sharing knowledge and decision-making processes instantaneously across their entire species. It's unprecedented." Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. Negotiating with a hive mind would be unlike anything she had ever attempted. Traditional diplomatic approaches rely on finding common ground between different perspectives, exploiting the natural divisions that existed within any government or military structure. But what leverage could she possibly have against a species that literally thought as one? "Status report from Earth Defense," she asked. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, her second-in-command and the most experienced military officer aboard, consulted his tactical display. "Not good, Ambassador. Admiral Morrison has recalled the entire fleet, but our nearest ships are still 18 hours out. Even if they arrived immediately, the tactical analysis is grim." He paused, clearly reluctant to continue. "Earth Defense estimates we could destroy perhaps 50 of their ships before being completely overwhelmed." 50 out of 10,000, Sarah murmured. Those aren't odds. That's a massacre. The bridge fell silent again. Through the communications system, they could hear the distant chatter of Earth's orbital stations as civilian transports desperately tried to evacuate personnel to the lunar colonies. But Sarah knew that even if every transport worked perfectly, they could only move a tiny fraction of Earth's 8 billion inhabitants. Ambassador, Torres said suddenly, we're being scanned. Sarah felt the familiar tingle of energy sensors washing over the ship. The Vorthans were taking a closer look at humanity's last diplomatic effort. She had specifically requested this mission, convincing the United Earth Council that their only hope lay in negotiation rather than hopeless military resistance. New transmission coming in, Torres reported. It's different, more focused. I think they're contacting us directly. Put it through. This time, the voice that emerged from the speakers was distinctly individual, though still carrying the harmonic undertones of Vorthan speech. Human vessel. You approach our fleet without weapons. Explain this action. Sarah stood, straightening her uniform. Even though the aliens couldn't see her, proper presentation was a habit ingrained through decades of diplomatic training. This is Ambassador Sarah Chen of the United Earth Council. I request formal audience with your leadership to discuss terms of coexistence. A pause. When the voice returned, it carried what might have been amusement. Coexistence is not possible. Your species lacks the evolutionary advancement necessary for integration into our empire. You will surrender or be eliminated. Before you make that decision, Sarah said carefully, I'd like to propose an alternative. A demonstration of human capabilities that might change your assessment. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could imagine the collective consciousness of 10,000 alien minds discussing her proposal in the space of heartbeats. Elaborate. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for since the Vorthan fleet first appeared. Everything depended on her reading of their psychology, her ability to find the one approach that might save her species. Your people clearly value strength and advancement, she began. But you judge us by our technology alone. Humans have survived and thrived not because of superior weapons or faster ships, but because of our ability to adapt, to find solutions where none seem to exist, and to work together despite our differences. Words are meaningless. Demonstrate this claimed capability. Sarah's heart raced. They were listening. More importantly, they were curious enough to engage rather than simply attack. That curiosity might be the crack in their armor that she needed. I propose a challenge, she said. Select your finest warrior, your most advanced tactical mind, and pit them against a single human in a contest of problem-solving and adaptation. If your champion wins, Earth surrenders unconditionally. If our representative succeeds, you withdraw from our system and enter into peaceful negotiations. The silence stretched so long that Sarah began to wonder if the connection had been severed. When the voice finally returned, it carried a new tone, something that might have been respect. Your proposal has merit. We accept your challenge. However, the contest will be of our choosing, designed to test the qualities you claim. One human against one Vorthan, with the fate of your world in the balance. I accept, Sarah said immediately. Very well. You will transport to our flagship in 1 hour. Come alone and unarmed. Any attempt at deception will result in the immediate destruction of your planet. The transmission ended. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew's shocked faces. Lieutenant Torres was the first to speak. Ambassador, you can't seriously be considering this. It could be a trap. Of course it's a trap, Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. But it's also our only chance. Dr. Martinez, I need everything we know about Vorthan psychology and culture downloaded to my personal datapad. Hayes, send a message to Earth Defense explaining the situation. And Torres. She paused, looking at the young communications officer who reminded her of her own son, currently serving on a colony world light years away. Send a message to my family. Tell them I love them, and that if this doesn't work, At least humanity went down fighting on our own terms. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah changed into her most formal diplomatic attire, a decision that might seem pointless, but which she knew could be psychologically important. First impressions mattered, especially when the stakes were the survival of an entire species. Dr. Martinez had compiled everything humanity knew about the Vorthons, which unfortunately wasn't much. They were an ancient species, their empire spanning hundreds of star systems. They valued order, efficiency, and what they termed evolutionary perfection. Most importantly, they had never been known to break their word once given. As the appointed time approached, Sarah stood again at the viewport, watching as a small crystalline shuttle detached from the massive Vorthon flagship. Its design was elegant beyond anything human engineers had achieved, moving through space with impossible grace. "Transport is docking," Hayes reported. "Ambassador, are you sure about this? We could still run. The Harmony is fast enough to reach hyperspace before they could intercept." Sarah shook her head. "And leave 8 billion people to die? No. This is what diplomats are for, Commander. To take the risks that might save lives." The airlock cycled, and Sarah found herself face to face with her first living Vorthon. The alien was indeed tall, nearly 8 feet in height, with a body that seemed to be composed of living crystal. Patterns of light moved beneath its translucent skin, and when it spoke, the sound came from multiple points on its form simultaneously. "Ambassador Chen, I am Resonance of Distant Stars, voice of the fleet. You will accompany me to the flagship." "I'm ready," Sarah said, stepping into the alien shuttle. As the small craft pulled away from the Harmony, Sarah caught one last glimpse of Earth through the viewport. The blue marble of her homeworld looked so small and fragile surrounded by the Vorthon fleet. She thought of her son, her colleagues, the billions of people depending on her success. The crystalline walls of the shuttle began to shift, creating what appeared to be viewing panels. Through them, Sarah could see the interior of the Vorthon flagship approaching. It was vast beyond comprehension, its internal structure resembling a combination of cathedral and computer core. Geometric patterns of light pulsed through transparent walls, and she could see hundreds of Vorthons moving through the corridors with purpose. "Your challenge awaits," Resonance of Distant Stars said as they docked. "Know that many of my people believe this contest to be pointless. They see your species as barely evolved beyond primitive tool use." "And what do you believe?" Sarah asked as they disembarked. The alien paused, its light patterns shifting to what might have been contemplation. "I believe that any species capable of achieving interstellar travel, regardless of their technology level, deserves to be understood before being dismissed. This contest will provide that understanding." They walked through corridors that defied human architectural concepts, where the walls themselves seemed alive with flowing energy. Other Vorthons stopped to observe the human ambassador, their crystalline forms creating a symphony of light as they communicated in ways Sarah couldn't begin to comprehend. Finally, they'd reached a vast chamber that could only be described as an arena. The space was circular, with raised galleries where hundreds of Vorthons had gathered to witness the contest. At the center stood a single figure that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The Vorthon champion was magnificent, its crystalline body larger and more complex than any she had seen. Light cascaded through its form in patterns of incredible beauty, and when it moved, reality itself seemed to bend slightly around it. "I am prime calculation of absolute truth," the champion said, its voice resonating through the chamber with harmonic frequencies that made Sarah's bones vibrate. "I have calculated 17,000 potential strategies for this contest. You cannot possibly succeed." Sarah stepped forward, her small human form dwarfed by the alien giant. Around the arena, hundreds of crystalline faces turned toward her, their light patterns creating a dazzling display of collective attention. "Prime calculation," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the crystal chamber. "You've made one critical error in your calculations. Impossible. State this error." Sarah smiled, drawing on every lesson learned in 25 years of diplomatic service. Every negotiation where the odds seemed impossible, every moment when human ingenuity had found a way forward. You've assumed that winning requires defeating you. But the greatest human victories have always come not from destruction, but from finding solutions that benefit everyone involved. Let me show you what I mean. The Battle of Minds. The arena fell silent as prime calculation of absolute truth processed Sarah's words. Light patterns flickered rapidly through its crystalline form, and the hundreds of Vorthan observers leaned forward in anticipation. Explain this solution, the champion commanded, its harmonic voice carrying notes of skepticism. Sarah walked to the center of the arena, her boots clicking against the polished crystal floor. Before I do, I need to understand the nature of this contest. What exactly are we competing for? Resonance of distant stars stepped forward from the gallery. The contest is simple, human. Prime calculation will present you with a scenario that has no solution. Your failure to solve it will demonstrate your species' inadequacy. Your world will then submit to Vorthan guidance. And if I succeed? Impossible, prime calculation interjected. But if you somehow provide an answer, the fleet will withdraw, and your species will be granted time to evolve. Sarah nodded slowly. I accept these terms, but I propose a modification. Instead of a single scenario, let's make it 3 challenges. If I fail any one of them, Earth surrenders. If I succeed in all 3, not only does your fleet withdraw, but we establish formal diplomatic relations between our species. The light patterns, in prime calculations form, shifted to what might have been amusement. Your confidence is noted and will make your failure more instructive. I accept. The arena's floor began to change, crystal panels rising and shifting to create a complex 3-dimensional display. Images appeared in the air above them, showing star charts, mathematical equations, and tactical formations. First challenge, prime calculation announced. A Vorthan colony world with 1 billion inhabitants faces destruction from a stellar collapse in exactly 6 standard hours. Our most advanced evacuation ships can transport 100,000 beings per hour. Our construction vessels require 8 hours to build additional transport capacity. How do you save the population? Sarah studied the display, noting the precise numbers and the apparent impossibility of the scenario. Around the arena, Vorthans waited for her inevitable failure. You're thinking like engineers, she said finally, looking at the problem in terms of moving people away from danger. But what if we move the danger away from the people? Impossible. A stellar collapse cannot be prevented or redirected. Not prevented, no, but the colony world can be moved. Sarah pointed to the star chart. Your displays show the planet has a stable magnetic field and atmosphere, which means it has a molten core. If we could destabilize the planet's orbit precisely, using your construction vessels to create gravitational anchors at calculated points, we could slingshot the entire world out of the danger zone. Prime calculations form flickered rapidly. The energy requirements would be enormous, yes, but you have 10,000 ships in this fleet alone. Their combined power output, channeled through a synchronized gravitational manipulation system, could generate sufficient force to alter a planetary orbit. The population stays safe, the world remains intact, and the only cost is energy expenditure. The arena erupted in harmonic discussion as hundreds of Vorthans communicated simultaneously. Sarah caught fragments of their mathematical conversations, calculations flowing between minds at light speed. The solution is theoretically viable, prime calculation admitted, its tone carrying what might have been surprise. Second challenge. The display shifted, showing a complex network of interconnected nodes with data flowing between them. The Vorthan collective consciousness processes information across 17 different dimensional frequencies. A cascade failure has occurred, causing system-wide amnesia. Each individual retains personal memories, but has lost all shared knowledge. How do you restore the collective database when no single mind contains complete information? Sarah circled the display, studying the network topology. This was clearly a scenario designed to be unsolvable by individualistic thinking. A human approach would seem inadequate. "You're assuming the shared knowledge is truly lost," she said. "But information doesn't disappear, it just becomes inaccessible. Each individual mind contains fragments of the whole. The key isn't trying to rebuild the complete database, but creating a new connection protocol that can piece together the fragments. The mathematical complexity would be beyond any single mind's capacity to calculate." "Exactly. So don't use a single mind." Sarah gestured to the assembled Vorthans. "Create a bootstrap collective. Start with 2 individuals who share overlapping memories. Their combined fragment creates a slightly larger piece of knowledge. Add a third mind with related memories, and the fragment grows. Continue the process, using each successful connection to attract compatible minds, until you've rebuilt the entire network organically. But without the central coordination protocols. You don't need them initially. Human social networks form the same way, through shared interests and experiences creating natural clusters. The coordination protocols will emerge naturally as the network rebuilds itself. You're not restoring the old system. You're growing a new one using the seeds of the old." This time, the harmonic discussion was even more intense. Sarah could see light patterns cascading through the crystalline forms as the concept spread through the assembled minds. "Fascinating," Prime Calculation said. "Your solution demonstrates an understanding of emergent complexity that we had not attributed to individual-based species." Third challenge. The display changed again, showing what appeared to be a tactical scenario. 2 fleets faced each other across a star system, with civilian populations on multiple worlds caught between them. The Vorthan Empire faces a rebel faction that has seized control of 6 colony worlds, holding civilian populations as hostages. The rebels demand complete independence and threaten to destroy all 6 worlds if any Vorthan ship approaches. Our tactical analysis shows that any assault, no matter how precisely executed, will result in the deaths of millions of innocents. How do you resolve this conflict? Sarah studied the scenario carefully. This was the most complex challenge yet, involving not just technical problems but moral and political considerations. The assembled Vorthans waited, their forms dimmed as if they expected this to be where human thinking finally failed. "The first thing I notice," Sarah said slowly, "is that you've framed this as a military problem requiring a military solution. But it's actually a communication breakdown. The rebels seized those worlds for a reason. What do they really want? Independence. They reject Vorthan guidance and wish to govern themselves. That's what they're demanding, not what they want. There's a difference." Sarah turned to face Prime Calculation directly. "In human negotiations, we've learned that the stated position is rarely the actual need. These rebels didn't wake up one day and decide to commit mass suicide along with millions of innocents. Something drove them to this extreme action. Their motivations are irrelevant. They threaten civilian lives. Their motivations are the key to the solution. Let me guess. The colonies they seized were the most recent additions to your empire, worlds that had been independent for generations before being guided into the Vorthan collective. The rebels aren't fighting for independence, they're fighting for identity." Sarah gestured to the tactical display. "Here's my solution. Offer them something more valuable than independence. Offer them partnership. Create a new category within your empire, associate worlds, where planets can maintain their individual cultures and governing systems while benefiting from Vorthan technology and protection. The rebels get to preserve their identity, the civilians stay safe, and your empire gains willing allies instead of resentful subjects. But our empire is built on unity of purpose and thought, and it can be even stronger with diversity of perspective. You've just seen how human individual thinking can solve problems that collective thought couldn't address. Imagine if your empire included dozens of species, each contributing their unique approaches to problem solving. You wouldn't just be maintaining order, you'd be fostering innovation." The arena fell completely silent. Prime Calculation's form had gone dark except for a single pulsing light at its center. Around the galleries, Hundreds of Vorthans had stilled their harmonic communications. Finally, Prime Calculation spoke, its voice carrying new harmonics that Sarah hadn't heard before. In each challenge, you have demonstrated something we did not expect. You have shown that individual consciousness, rather than being a limitation, can be a source of unprecedented creative solutions. Resonance of distant stars descended from the gallery, its crystalline form reflecting the arena's lights in complex patterns. The contest is concluded. Ambassador Chen has succeeded in all 3 challenges. According to our agreement, the fleet will withdraw and formal diplomatic relations will be established. Sarah felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly knocked her over. Earth was safe. Humanity would survive. But as she looked around at the assembled aliens, she realized something more important had happened. Prime Calculation, she said, I have a proposal that goes beyond our original agreement. Speak. Your empire has maintained order and stability across hundreds of worlds for millennia. That's an incredible achievement. But imagine what you could accomplish if you combine that organizational capability with the creative problem-solving that comes from diverse perspectives. What if, instead of just establishing diplomatic relations, we created something new together? Elaborate. Sarah took a deep breath, recognizing that she was about to make the most important proposal in human history. A partnership. Not human submission to Vorthan guidance, and not Vorthan adoption of human chaos, but a genuine collaboration. Your collective efficiency combined with our individual creativity. Your technological mastery combined with our adaptability. The harmonic discussion that erupted was unlike anything Sarah had heard before. It sounded almost musical, with complex themes and variations weaving through the crystalline forms. When it finally subsided, Prime Calculation stepped forward. This proposal has merit, but it would require unprecedented changes to both our societies. How would such a partnership function? We start small, Sarah replied. Joint research projects, cultural exchanges, shared colonies where both species can learn from each other. Over time, we develop new models of cooperation that neither of us could have imagined alone. Resonance of distant stars approached, its light patterns shifting in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as curiosity. Your species continues to surprise us, Ambassador. We came here expecting to evaluate a primitive civilization for potential integration. Instead, we find minds capable of solutions we ourselves could not conceive. That's exactly why this partnership could work, Sarah said. We each have strengths the other lacks. Together, we could solve problems that neither species could handle alone. Prime Calculation's form suddenly blazed with light, patterns cascading through its crystalline structure in waves of brilliant color. The collective consciousness has reached consensus. We accept your proposal, Ambassador Chen. The Vorthan Empire will enter into formal alliance with humanity. The arena erupted in harmonic celebration, hundreds of alien voices creating the symphony of approval. Sarah stood in the center of it all, a small human figure surrounded by beings of living light, and realized that this moment marked not just the survival of her species, but the birth of something entirely new in the galaxy. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah thought of her crew aboard the Harmony, of Earth waiting anxiously for news, of her son serving on a distant colony world. They would all wake tomorrow to a universe transformed, where humanity was no longer alone but part of something greater. The last ambassador had become the first architect of an unprecedented alliance, and in the crystalline halls of the Vorthan flagship, 2 species began the long, challenging, and ultimately rewarding work of building a future together. The cold stars that had seemed so threatening now sparkled with promise, illuminating the path toward a galaxy where difference was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated.